Just because we've been keeping reptiles forever doesn't mean we're keeping them correctly. And today we're going to go over the top 5 reptiles that you might not be keeping right. My name's Adam, this is Pikachu, you're watching Wickens Wicked Reptiles, stick around. Throughout this list, I think you might be surprised that some of these reptiles we keep the most incorrectly, or the ones I find most incorrectly kept on Instagram and Facebook pages and things like that, are the most common ones that we keep. And then there are some ones that are just, you can't really blame most people for not knowing how to take care of them. You can only blame them for not knowing how to take care of them before they get them, because they are kind of obscure. So let's just start off. First of all, I don't mean to throw a shade at anybody in particular. This video is not directed at anybody. It's just I see a lot of stuff on Instagram that is like, you shouldn't do that. So let's just start off with number 5, ball pythons, which sounds ridiculous. We keep ball pythons as a group collectively in the reptile hobby more than basically any other reptile. There's probably more ball pythons than any other snake, or it's very close anyway. This is kind of scary because the most that I see in terms of bad setups is almost always for ball pythons. Now, this isn't a dig at tubs or racks or anything like that. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just talking about if you have a pet, you're trying to give your pet the best possible life, and you don't do it correctly by a mile. And this is what I mean. I see a lot of people keeping their ball pythons in 10-gallon aquariums or 20-gallon aquariums or 40-gallon aquariums, and those people are the ones who tell me, and this is my favorite thing ever, well, if you put them in a bigger enclosure, they're gonna feel stressed out. No, there is no such thing as too big of an enclosure. Nobody who really knows anything about reptiles will ever tell you this. The people who tell you that reptiles get stressed out from too big of an enclosure are the same people that would tell you to stick a T-Rex in a 70-gallon, otherwise it might be too stressed to eat and find its water. Just like the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard.
Still sassy.
And what I mean by this is, if you're telling me, well, trust me, bro, in my collection, these reptiles, they need to be in 20-gallon enclosures or whatever, you're just not giving them enough hiding spots. Or the humidity and the heating isn't right. Simply, if you have your ball python in a room, say a 10 by 12 room, right? Prison cell basically, or a bedroom, and you give it enough hiding spots and you give it water in a couple different places, and like, it's gonna be fine. Like, you're gonna be fine as long as all the parameters are on point. My point is, for this video, is that a lot of people keep them in too small of an enclosure. And that's my armpit. How does that smell? And I don't mean to get super spicy about it. I'm just saying that I think that the biggest thing that we need to think about, and it's going to be a reoccurring theme, is just enclosure size and what we put in the enclosures. And humidity is another big thing too. I see a lot of people having their ball pythons in a glass aquarium, which, whatever, there is a right way to do that. It's not wrong to have them that way, but they have an open lid and they have heat lights basking down and no humidity whatsoever. You can see it's like dry and crusty in there, and there's no humid hide. And there is a way to do it where you just have a humid hide and you don't need the entire enclosure to be 60% humidity, 50-60% humidity, but you don't even see that. So my thing here is just bare minimums. Let's talk about the enrichment thing. A lot of people don't give their animals really anything in their enclosure besides a water bowl. So it's left feeling stressed out, and this goes with all animals, a lot of different types of species, but especially with ball pythons. And I am aware, I'm not silly, I know that because we keep ball pythons more than basically anything else, there's going to be more instances of this because there's more of them. Unfortunately, you're always going to have bad owners, I get it. You're just going to see more of it with the more common species and the ones you could find for super cheap, because no one's buying a $1,000 animal and then neglecting it. Well, not nobody, but most people wouldn't do that. They have an investment and they're going to protect their investment. But if you go and you buy a $25 normal ball python from a classified ad on Craigslist, Kijiji, whatever, well, then you're much more likely to be like, it's 25 bucks, I'll feed it later. And by the time you actually get around to feeding it, it's been 4 weeks or whatever else, and you realize that the water bowl's been empty for 2. My point is just like kind of neglect here. So, I mean, if this is you, it is what it is. Everyone makes mistakes. My recommendation, make sure they've got a secure enclosure. So if you have a glass aquarium, just cover it on 3 sides with black construction paper or something like that, so they feel a little bit more secure. Give it the right humidity, give it the right temperatures, and just make sure it's a big enough enclosure. Stop putting your full-grown ball pythons in 40-gallon. You can't do that. Don't do that. Number 4, most monitors. And here's my opinion on this. There are monitor people, and then there are people who keep monitors. And what I mean by this is there are certain people who go all out. They give great husbandry to their animals. My man, Professor Herp, has a great example with his Ackies. He does more than the bare minimum, above and beyond. But there are people who just get, say, a Savannah monitor, which is the most neglected or one of the most neglected reptiles that we have in this hobby, and just kind of throw it into a 40-gallon breeder because they read on a forum from 2009 that you're supposed to do that, and because that was the first thing they ever read, in passing, they just assume it's right and don't want to do any further reading. And this is wrong, and there's a certain thing with Savannah monitors where we see, because they're so cheap, a lot of people... Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but some people don't put very much effort into learning about them. They need really high temperatures. They need lots of room to dig. They need a varied diet. Poor diet is one of the things that kill these guys the most. They don't get them tested for internal parasites. If you're buying a $25 or $40 Savannah monitor, it's probably going to have parasites, so it's probably wild caught. So it's just like a lot of not doing enough for your animals. But this extends too. There's even people who get crazy things like, I don't know, water monitors and don't give them a water receptacle or enough room at all. They just kind of throw them into a grow tent and then that's it. Now, don't get me wrong, grow tents can be awesome for some species. I'm not saying they're not at all. I think they can make great enclosures. I'm just saying that you can't just turn a grow tent on its side and throw in an animal that gets to like 5 or 6 feet long. You just can't do that. And that's the other thing too with Ackies, is I see people throw them in 40s or 70s or 120 you could probably get away with one, but just like this much substrate and not the right type of substrate and not enough basking platforms and the diet is never, enough. And I shouldn't say never, I just mean in these examples, it's almost always with bad husbandry with the enclosure goes bad husbandry with the diet. I do know why. It's because if you're neglectful of one thing, you're probably not going to put lots of effort into the other thing. And if you put lots of effort into one thing, then you'll probably put into the other thing. It's just human nature. So not all monitors, but definitely some monitors, or maybe even most monitors, don't get the care that they actually require and that they need. Monitors are not cheap. If you watched last week's video, which you can watch right up here, about how much it costs to keep my entire collection, I'd go right into the financials and show you the spreadsheets and everything. If I had 100 monitors, that number would be way up. The monitors just take a lot more care. In most circumstances, obviously there's difference between caring for Ackies and caring for Argus monitors or water monitors or whatever else. Number 3, turtles and tortoises. Again, because they're so common, especially turtles, and especially because you can get red ear sliders for free all day long on Craigslist and Kijiji. Literally all day long, you can get these guys for free. And I think that's one of the main problems, is that they are just kind of like a fly-by-night, get it for my kid for his birthday to say I got him something, whatever. Or, I'll change the water, Dad, I promise. And it gets nice out and then you're out riding your bike instead of doing water changes. I know what that's like. So I think that these guys they seem easy, but they're not. And a lot of people give them really small enclosures because that's what you see in movies and TV shows and the dentist's office or wherever they have turtles to look nice as like an ornament, as an art piece more than a living animal. And don't get me wrong, animals can be art pieces, but you also have to feed them and take care of them properly. And as an example, and no knock or hate on the person I got them from, but I got 2 turtles in a 50-gallon enclosure. These turtles should have had at least 100 gallons of aquarium, 100 gallons of water to swim in. And for 25 years, these turtles were swimming in this 50, so it was just way too small. Now, we upgraded them last week. It wasn't a really huge rush because it's been 25 years, but we finally did it. We upgraded these guys. I guess it's been a few months since we had them. And they have 120 gallons now. So it's more than enough. And the water, we bought the most ridiculous pump for these guys. It's made for a 400-gallon aquarium just to keep it super clean. Just going above and beyond, bought them a really cool basking spot, the whole thing. Just because if you can, which you should be able to if you buy something, you should go above and beyond. I just don't see the reason why you wouldn't. And if you want to be selfish about it, which, I mean, at the end of the day, we keep reptiles for selfish reasons, to love them and to look at them and to have them, right, in our own collection. Well, wouldn't you want something that's more fun to look at? It is way more fun to watch my little map turtle swim around in this 100 gallons than it was in the 50 gallon. It's just more space. He looks smaller because it's a bigger enclosure, so it's funnier to watch him swim. He can swim bigger distances. And tortoises, even. I see people, and I know a guy, and he's got a tortoise in a 75-gallon glass aquarium. You can't keep tortoises, and I think it's a redfoot. You can't keep tortoises in glass with glass sides. It drives them crazy. You have to have most tortoises, I should say most, not all. Most tortoises will try to get through a barrier if they can see it. You have to give them like a wall that they can't see through. And it doesn't matter. You tell these people this, oh, well, I've kept them like this for, well, it doesn't matter. You've been keeping them wrong. Just because you've been driving for 40 years doesn't mean that you're better than a NASCAR driver who did his first race yesterday. That guy's better than you. It's just the way it is. Just because you've been doing it for a long time doesn't mean you're an expert. And I think that's the main thing. We've been keeping turtles and tortoises wrong for so long, and it should become like mainstream. And especially with tortoises too, people buy these baby sulcatas, super cute, and then by the time they get to these like boulder dog status, then they just kind of keep them in the same small enclosures, or they'll try to build them something that's still too small. So I just think that it's like more than anything else, it's definitely the size of the enclosures, but also the diet is another main thing. I see people just feeding their tortoise a prepared tortoise diet and never giving them anything else. Never giving them fresh greens. Like, you can do that, I guess, but why? Why not go out and buy some mixed greens from the grocery store for $4 and then feed your tortoises for a week? It's so cheap and just so much more fun to watch them eating these. Like, I'll throw a pear in there that's overripe, just enough that I wouldn't eat it anymore, and watch them go to town on it. And it is so cute. I love watching that, and it's good for them. Number 2, this one might chap some behinds. I don't care. BCCs and BCIs, or BCs and BIs, boas is basically what I'm saying. The semi-arboreal variety that almost never gets semi-arboreal enclosures. And I get it. They're big animals. They can get to, 8 feet if they're a BCC. Some say even larger than that. This isn't a care guide. But I think that most people, they cheap out because it's really hard to find a suitable enclosure that gives them climbing space. And I've been guilty of this also. In fact, I am building the most ridiculous enclosure right now for my BCI. I've been talking about it on Discord. There's a link below if you want to talk about reptiles and stuff, but we'll keep that for down the road. It's been on Patreon and stuff like that, but as we're building the reptile room, I'm building into the reptile room a really amazing enclosure with lots of climbing space for Franny, my BCI. Because after all, these guys do spend time in the trees. So why are we giving them enclosures that are a foot high? Again, I'm not attacking breeders or people who use tub systems so that they can provide high quality animals as pets to other people. It's a different thing altogether. If I'm attacking anybody, which I'm not, but if I was, I would be attacking the people who have one animal and cheap out on the enclosure because they can. You shouldn't do that. Give them the best enclosure that you can, especially if this is like your one pet. And I think a boa is a great pet for someone who wants a pet snake and just wants one, because you have like everything in one package. It's semi-arboreal, it's beautiful, it eats every time. You don't have to worry about it getting too big that it might hurt you. It's not super small and fragile. Boas are freaking awesome, but I would urge you, if you can, give them an enclosure where they can climb a bit, because they spend lots of time in the trees, right? We've learned this, and this video is kind of, in a way, inspired by Dave Kaufman's series about how he goes out to the wild and goes and looks at how we actually keep reptiles. It's my favorite series on all of YouTube. And I mean, I'm just sitting here behind a desk making a video about kind of the same sort of thing, where we should be replicating the natural habitat of these animals the best that we can. So I think that with boas, I mean, we're just not really doing a great job. And I think I see this more than most of the other ones, because there are a lot of really great ball python keepers. There's a lot of really great keepers of these animals, but boas is the one I see more than anything else, just not enough. And overfeeding. Holy cow, is there overfeeding going on with these animals? I mean, some boas you only need to feed once a month. Once a month, or less, some people will say, but once a month is kind of how I feed Franny, and she looks great. Okay, you get it. No more beating a dead horse. Number 1, I see this more than anything else by a country mile, bearded dragons. Bearded dragons, kept in 40-gallon enclosures with no UVB light, with a little tiny basking bulb that doesn't get their enclosure to 80 degrees ambient, never mind giving them a basking spot of 95. Like, it's insane how often I see this. And I get messages every day on Instagram. Hey man, I got a 40-gallon enclosure. How many bearded dragons can I keep in it? 1/2 of a bearded dragon is how much. Don't actually do this. Don't, like, no magician stuff with your bearded dragon.
How did he get it?
I do not recommend this. No assembly required bearded dragons. I'm trying to say here that your bearded dragon should be in a 120-gallon enclosure. That's what I recommend. And I get it, you go to a pet store and you find a 40-gallon enclosure that says Bearded Dragon Starter Kit right on it. And yeah, that starter kit would probably be good for a bearded dragon that is a baby, up to a juvenile. But then you need to give them a big enough enclosure. And again, another thing, no climbing space. I see these bearded dragons with no room to climb. And they are semi-arboreal lizards. In the wild, you're going to find them on fence posts, on tree stumps, stuff like that. So you have to give them the proper enclosure. And a lot of people will keep these guys on calcium sand. Now, loose substrate isn't bad. There's a whole care guide right here if you want to watch my sort of controversial statement on substrate, but you don't need to keep them on paper towel or slate, but you shouldn't definitely keep them on the wrong substrate that is loose. Loose substrate's great, but not calcium sand. And on top of the enclosure size being absolutely terrible, I'm talking about 40 gallons is not even close. You're not trying hard enough. You gotta try harder. And the basking spot being way too low, just not warm enough at all. I'm talking about 80 degrees or like, you gotta get it higher than that. It's an animal that's from parts of Australia where it gets very hot. So you have to give them a very hot basking spot. And no UVB, or people who don't change their UVB bulbs. I mean, UVB, depending on the type of bulb it is, it could be 6 months or a year, but you're gonna need to replace them at least every year. Probably most likely every 6 to 8 months. So this is another thing too. And people will say to me all the time, well, my bearded dragon likes to run around the house and he gets his UVB from the sunlight. Well, no, there's gas in your window that prevents UVB from coming in, so that's not a thing. And no, he doesn't enjoy running around your 68-degree house. That's just the only option that you're giving him. So it's just, they're kept wrong so often. And we all saw the Kim Kardashian thing like last week or the week before, so it's just sad. So on my list, number one has to be bearded dragons because I see it so freaking often. All right, I'm off my soapbox. What do you guys think? Did you enjoy this kind of like harder, in-your-face type of style about... I mean, this is a thing that I care a lot about. People should be caring about their animals more than you see a lot of the time. But I do want to make something clear. Most people, and unfortunately I'm not really reaching these people because most people who watch channels like this actually really love their animals. But the caveat is, because you love your animals and you're doing it right anyway, and you're watching it kind of like top of the mind when you watch these videos, and maybe you can tell your friends who aren't as into reptiles as you. And it's all of our responsibility as the reptile community to do better and make sure that people are doing better. Well, I guess it's not really your responsibility technically, but I mean, kind of. So there you go, top 5 animals that we are probably not keeping correctly. What do you think? Is there something on the list that shouldn't have been? Did I miss something? And of course, I got this idea out of the comment section below. So if you want to be the inspiration for next week's video, throw your comment down below, your video ID in the comment section. And as always, a special thanks to the Patreon supporters. You guys are freaking awesome. You know, Reptiles is my collection I don't talk about on this channel. You get discounts on the merch, videos early, extra videos, extra content. I'll post a cute picture of Pikachu just for you guys after this video. For as little as $1 a month, you can be part of that as well. And I think I plugged absolutely everything. If you want to feed your bearded dragon correctly, because diet was another thing, Black Soldier Fly larvae at our friends at Grub Terra, WWR, discount code for 10% off. Okay, that's it. Hit subscribe, hit like, see you on Monday.